making based on your beta tests. So we can go back to design, redesign, improve it before it becomes operational. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
More or less? Yes, sir.
Would you say that's the most volatile space in the five aspects of the life cycle?
What, beta testing?
I mean, in terms of like for example, if you're releasing something like a beta to the consumer market for the purpose of gathering data, from consumer experience, that seems like that would be how that goes.
And because this process of transitioning between the transition phase into the operation is so delicate, that's why you need these other processes in place, so that when you get here, you're solid. You've taken everything into consideration. You didn't leave anything out. Okay, so let me give you a quick rundown here, though. Again, the strategy management here in service strategy, the process of strategy management here dictates that somebody needs to be responsible. When I think of strategy management here, that means that if we're executives, for example, we're going to assign somebody, one of you, to be the manager of this service, of this for the strategy, for this particular service that we're trying to work with, evaluate or bring forth. Okay, so this person right here is going to be the person responsible for the strategy manager. His or her responsibility is to manage this strategy phase. So that person is going to call meetings. For example, I'm going to call up a meeting if I'm the strategy manager, and I'm going to hold people accountable. Okay? I'm going to say, okay, we need that person here. You're required to be here. See, that's why email etiquette, if you've ever gone through email etiquette, right, communication protocols, if you want somebody to be in that meeting, that person has to be in the to box, right, required to be there, or not required to be there in a meeting. So when you're putting meetings together, I'm saying, okay, this person is required to be there, that person not really required to be there. They can be there if they choose to, okay? And then there may be other people who shouldn't be there at all, period. I'm also going to document everything. When we have meetings, I'm the strategy manager. Okay, I'm going to document all the decisions that we've made, and then when we're done with the meeting, I'm going to send emails out to every individual with their action items, so that we have a clear understanding. So I'm managing the strategy process. Okay, when we're done with strategizing, I grab all the documentation of all the decisions that we've made, budgets that have been proposed, okay? The list of the portfolio, we're going to talk about this in a minute, okay? And how it looks, what decisions we made here from a strategic standpoint. Normally, this is just meetings that we're having and decisions that we're making. Documentation about demand, documentation about the relationships that we have that are pertinent to this specific service that we're working with, and risk assessment, right? Risk assessment here has to do with trying to forecast what risk we might encounter here and how we are going to mitigate that risk. Okay? Once we're done with this process, I grab all the documentation from the strategic phase, and I hand it over to the design coordination. Okay, the design coordinator may be me, or it may be another person altogether. Okay, but my job here as a strategy manager is to coordinate that all this take place, that we have all the documentation necessary, that we have the signatures necessary, that we have the budget in place, that it has been evaluated, that we've taken security into consideration, that we've taken, to some extent, human resources, because you have to put numbers together, okay? And so once we've done that and we got a green light, then I hand that over to the design coordinator, okay? Financial management here, again, has to do with budget creation. How much is it going to cost to buy equipment, to hire people, to create partnerships, What processes do we need to have in place? Okay? But in any case, financial management, again, has to do with the money. Do we understand the numbers? A lot of companies fail here in financial management because what happens, and I've seen this happen time and time again. I work for a company that only had $2,000 in marketing in their budget for the services that they provide. All of these services, not just one. $2,000 for marketing? Really? And their argument was that this service works okay, and it becomes known by word of mouth very effectively, no problem. But that wasn't the case in my view. Okay? In my view, I was saying, well, I need at least $20,000 of in the budget for marketing, because I was doing marketing as well as many other things, but I was managing a budget. Okay, but I was not involved in the creation of the budget. By the time I got to the position, the budget had already been approved by the strategy here. So I'm trying to work in operations with a budget that was very ineffective. And so I'm going, well, wait a second. I can't conduct this operation without these dollars. I can't do this without that. I'm going to need more human resources to make this service happen. Somebody failed to do their homework during the strategic phase. And now I'm paying the price. See, I can't take responsibility for that. You cannot fire me, you know, for not effectively doing the work when I was not given the tools from a financial standpoint. And this was an argument I used to have with my boss. You know, I told him one time, listen, man, I worked there 10 years. We could say pretty much anything. And I would be like, you know what your problem is that you give me a spoon and you say, go build a foundation for a 50-story building over there. I can't do that with a spoon, man. I need equipment. I need experts. I need people who know how to work those tractors and move the dirt, and lay the concrete. I don't know how to do that. I need human resources. I need the money to do it. And then they were like, well, you're always asking for money. Well, it takes money to run this program or this process. And that's not my job. That's your job. My job is to conduct the operation. But if you didn't do your job, how are you mad at me now? You need to go back and redraw your budget. Manage your financials effectively. Okay? What I can do here, the thing is that we didn't have a real process in place for change management. Okay? Because change management happens here in the transition. Right? There's a process here for change management which we're going to talk about. But see, I wanted to change the budget, but I couldn't do anything at the time. I had to operate that whole year with a crappy budget, and then I couldn't propose a new budget until the end of the year. So, hey, if we didn't meet the numbers, okay, I didn't meet the numbers, but that's maybe not the only reason, but that's definitely one reason why I didn't meet the numbers, and I was not part of the financial management, so you can't make me responsible. You guys with me? Yes? Yeah. Am I boring you? No? Yes, Manuel.
Yeah, on the service strategy phase, is there a specific timeline, okay, from beginning to end before it moves into service design?
Not necessarily. It could be, though, that here the strategy management creates a timeline. At this point, we will create a timeline, but it's not a specific timeline. It depends on the service. Okay? It could be that we're trying to bring a service up and running by January 1st, 2018. Okay, so that's our timeline. You see? It could be that we need to bring this service on by September 15th, so now our timeline is shorter. And so that's important in the sense that I need to take that into consideration when I'm building my budget. I need to take into consideration here all these other aspects. How many people am I going to need to hire? What talents do we need? Do we already have the talents in the company? So maybe we can insource. If we don't have the talent within the company, then we need to outsource. You see how that works? And so I'll have to take into consideration security. I have to take into consideration here real estate. Do we have the building? Do we need a building? What location? Is it multiple locations? What is going to be our backup plan? Risk management, right? We're working with risk management here. If the equipment fails, Mr. Security Guy, I'm just using you as the security guy. What's your name?
Anthony.
Anthony. So Anthony, the security guy, what do we have in place if there's a breach in security, right? What do you need? You need to tell me what you need so I can put it in the financial management. I'm going to need to meet with the different stakeholders during this process in order to figure out, what is it that I'm going to need to make this happen later down the road? Who's going to be responsible for change management? How much is it going to cost to do the testing? How much is it going to cost to deploy it? How much is it going to cost to configure it? How many individuals do we need to manage relationships, external relationships and internal relationships? How many computers do we need? But if it fails, what is our backup plan? What is our contingency plan if it fails? And based on the importance of the service, how much contingency plan do we need? Okay, do we need just another server, or we need to consider the location? If we're gonna open the business here or start a new service here, have we considered what happens if there's an earthquake? How do we continue to operate? Okay. Well, maybe we need to have a building in another state, just sitting there, okay, with no equipment, just an empty room, if you will, that we can use in case that there's an earthquake here and the service gets completely shut down, and we need at least the vital business functions. That's a key word, by the way. Vital business functions is a key word. How do I maintain the vital business functions of the service or the organizations or the company in case of natural disaster? And how important is this service? Is this service part of the vital business functions? If it is part of the vital business functions, then we may need to invest a lot of money in a contingency plan. Maybe instead of just having an empty room in another state or an empty building, we have a building with equipment that we just fire up and we're ready to go. A hot site. We have a plan for flying personnel to another state in case of natural disaster. See that? I need to take all of that into consideration here. How much equipment do I need? How much security do I need? What software do we need? How much money is it going to cost? I need to have meetings right here, right now, with every stakeholder of this service before I finalize my budgets, because I'm trying to manage finances, okay? And so it may be that I'm going to run this budget to all my stakeholders and go, okay, can you please review this budget? See, because once you say you're okay, it's going to be really hard for you to come back later and say, oh, I'm going to need $50,000 for a new server. It's like, come on, Anthony, we had this conversation, man. You said that $650,000 was enough, and now we're way past that point. You're gonna need to make a business case for me to go back and meet with my executives again and justify an additional $50,000 in the budget. Yes, sir.
Is the corporate mission statement core to strategic alignment in terms of when you're designing the strategy?
Remember that we're looking at ITIL from IT service management perspective. So we're looking at it from the IT department perspective. And what is the goal of the IT department? To align to the mission and vision and goals and objectives of the organization. And so yes, right, we are trying to, every service has to go through the process of evaluation. That's why we're strategizing. Does that service bring value to the overall mission, vision, goals, and objectives of the organization? Well, we're going to decide that. Okay, the service portfolio, and I have a slide later for a service portfolio, but the service portfolio is in essence a list of all the services that the company provides, including services that are in the design mode. They're being designed, okay? They're not live yet. They're being designed. Also includes services that are live. That's what the portfolio is. A list of all the services a company provides, whether it's being designed, whether it's active, or whether it's being deactivated. We don't get rid of it, we deactivate it. Why do we deactivate it? Because maybe later down the road, that service becomes relevant again, brings value to the customer. Customer says, yes, this service is value, bring it back. Right, so we need to bring it back from one phase to another. In any case, service portfolio is what? A list of all the services that a company provides, whether that service is a service that's in the design process or in the operation process, live service, or a service that has been discontinued or retired is the technical word. Okay, retire. If the service has been retired, it still lives in a list within the database of the organization, okay? Because maybe 3 years down the road, we say, hey, what services were we providing like 3 years before? Weren't we providing that service like 3 years before? Let's evaluate that, because that seems to align to the need of the company and the customers right now. And so let's go back to the list, and let's look at that list of services, and let's evaluate whether that's a service that we need to bring back, right? So, but why is service portfolio management here? It is here because this is where we're going to make executive decisions whether that service can be designed or become operational, or that service needs to retire. The decision is being made there, and that's why service portfolio management is here, but it's more of a strategic decision, basically a conversation that we're having, right, and that we're agreeing whether we should make changes to the service portfolio or not, okay? And then demand management is understanding your horizon, the market, okay? Because you can't bring a service without having evaluated what the alternatives are. What are the alternatives? I don't know what the alternatives are. You're coming up with this service, but did you do your homework? You say it's a great idea. It's a wonderful idea. It's huge. Oh, man, you guys are a tough crowd. Yes?
I'm not sure if I'm going to ask the question in the correct way, but this life cycle process for companies that have products or services would be an individual process for each product and service, and not one thing for the whole company, right?
That's a great question, yes. So the question is, do we have this process for all the services or just one service, even though it's within one company? Well, this is for one service. Every service that we provide has to have all these elements in place, okay? We're gonna do financial management for that specific service. So if we have 20 services, we may have, you know, 20 different processes, or 20 different what we call CMDBs. A CMDB is a configuration management database. So I will have a configuration management database. This will make sense later, by the way. I know this is kind of confusing, but I just gave you another dot. Okay, we'll take a break here in a minute, but so yes, for every service we're gonna have to have this together. Okay, There's a budget for every one of the services because especially the bigger the service, the more so that this is important. Because I don't want to mix the budget for this service with that service. Of course, there's going to be a budget at a higher level, right? Because I'm operating here. But if the executives are probably dealing with a budget at a much higher level where they have numbers for all of these departments. Okay? So budgets can be, you know, they're monsters basically. You know, I mean, you have all these different budgets for these different departments, right? Every department can have a budget, and for every service, right? Within that department, there will be a budget for that service as well. So a budget can be, you know, can operate at various levels, okay? I used to manage a $750,000 budget, okay? So I could make decisions based on the budget within my department. My budget did not have anything to do with the other departments in the organization. And so when I manage my budget, I look at the numbers, and you know, the numbers had to be within parameters because we had a bookkeeper that she was just really mad at her work, right? She really loved what she did, and she was just like down to the nitty-gritty of the numbers, right? That's all she did all day. And so I had to balance my budget every month with that person, and I had to justify every expense, okay? So it's not like I could just have the money and I could do whatever I want with it. I had to make sure that I was operating within the budget. And so let's say I had money for team building. Okay, that's one of the things I'm going to ask in my budget, right? If you're not familiar with budgets, you should go online, not right this very minute, okay? But you should go online and look for a budget. Just do a research for budgets or how to create a budget and what a budget should contain, okay? And then you'll get all kinds of different budgets, you know, personal budgets, company budgets, individual budgets, family budgets, the whole 9 yards, okay? You should have a budget for your own personal life, by the way. If you don't have one, you should think about having one, because that will definitely help you be more strategic on how you spend your money. Okay? Now, what was I saying? Where was I?
Budget. Personal.
We're talking about demand management? No. Where was I? Come on, guys. Oh, that's right. Thank you, Evelina. Thank you. So I was managing the budget, and so sometimes I could spend dollars that belong here to justify this, but then I had to, you know, write documentation, do a memo to file that into the database, you know, electronically, but also on a document. I had to, you know, write a document basically explaining why I moved that money from here to here, and then print that document, sign it, and then attach it to, you know, whatever receipts, and then submit that to booking, okay? Hey, they only gave me $2,000 for marketing, remember? So I had to move money from other areas, you see, and justify. And sometimes, you know, you have to go over budget. I'm in the red, not my fault. Somebody failed here to build the proper budget, okay? So in any case, here we're managing demand. We're trying to make sure that we understand the panoramic view of the market, okay? So that we've taken into consideration options. How are my competitors operating in comparison to how we are operating, okay? And so it's basically making sure that we understand the market. That's what and that we have enough devices or components or services or processes in place to make sure that we either increase production if the demand is high, right, or decrease production if the demand is low. And in order to do that, we may need to examine what we call the patterns of business activities. That's the PBA. That's another acronym that you should know. What is a PBA? A PBA is patterns of business activity. And by examining the patterns of business activity, of previous, right, activity, then I can figure out what the demand is. Well, maybe we figure out here that during the months of February, March, May, for example, February, March, and April, okay, there is very little demand, okay? So by understanding the demand, we can say, you know what, we don't need to buy so much product, okay, during these 3 months, because the patterns of business activity dictates that these 3 months are the slow months of the year. And so we're going to save dollars by maybe, you know, having these people only work part-time during this time. You see where I'm going with that? Right? Yeah, I'm understanding the demand, and because I understand the demand, I can say, well, the busiest months are October, September, October, November, December, okay? And so during these months, we're going to hire more people. We're going to bring the ones that we have half-time, full-time, and we're going to have to hire more human resources, right? Why? Because I'm understanding the demand in the market, and by having that understanding, then I can make strategic decisions. And these are just strictly business strategic decisions, right? And this is why see, if you have a good understanding of this, then you'll understand why managers make certain decisions, right? Because you might say, man, why are they cutting my hours? Where this guy don't like me, or, you know, what is it? Why are they doing that? Bad people, okay? You don't. By understanding the demand, then this is why it's important that managers have good communication, supervisors, that within an organization that there is effective communication, transparency, right? Company culture has to be so transparent that you understand why I'm making these decisions. And sometimes it's really hard to explain, you know, to people who are in the operation phase why we're making that strategic decision, because they probably won't really grasp the concept for whatever reason, because there's just too many pieces in the puzzle, right? And there isn't enough time, or it's not part of your job description, and so you don't really need to know that information, and so that's where it becomes a little bit. Now we're dealing with the people, right? With the emotion aspects of the thing, with the cognitive aspect of things, and that could be a tricky venture, if you will. And then here, business relations basically means, okay, managers, these are the relationships that are happening at the executive level. Maybe Hige and I, we're executives. He has the tie for it. By the way, this is the floor. That's the floor, that's not me. Can you guys hear that? Okay. So we meet up, we make a strategic decision, we have a meeting because this guy is a stakeholder, okay? And so I have to manage the relationship between Nagy and me, right? Because I'm representing this organization, okay? Maybe we need to have relationships with other companies, external, at the executive level, okay? Because they are partners, and they provide products to us, but I have to make sure that I have a good executive relationship at that level. That way, if something is happening down here, I can mediate that at the executive level, okay? There are medium managers that operate at like junior level managers, okay? They will have their own relationships that they need to have and manage. Okay, relationship management is a big deal here. And I'm telling you, with relationship management, it may mean that I have money in my financial budget, right? And that's really what I was trying to say earlier. That it may be that I have money there for team building or partner development. Could be money that I have in my budget. So if I have money for that, what can I do with that money? If I have money to manage this relationship, how would I utilize that money? Just give me some examples or some ideas.
Research and development? Yeah.
One at a time now. Go ahead.
Hire new people for that department.
Well, no. Here I'm not trying to hire anybody. I'm just trying to manage the relationship.
Gift item. Some gift item.
Yes.
Pizza party.
Pizza party. There you go. That's right. Hey, man, we'll buy you some pizza. You know what Robert Half did for us, Robert Half, the recruiters? They pay for us to have the launch event of this program last year at the, what's that aircraft carrier that's out here? What is it? The Hornet. That's right. So we had the launch of this event, we had it at the Hornet. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was upwards of $7,000 to rent the place. Right? How's the guy gonna just pull up $7,000 and spend it just like that for us to rent the place for us and buy the food? Right? I think they spent like $11,000. For and we had wine. Yeah. You know, so why? Because they have money here in the business relationships, right? It may seem in the surface like there's no benefit to them, but in fact there is, because they need you in order for them to continue to operate. They need a talent pool that is coming their direction. You see where I'm going with this? So they're not really spending money here at this point. They're spending the money here. So how does he have the power, right? The guy who runs the business, to spend $11,000 on a non-profit organization and justify it to his bosses, right? Well, that's because, you know, I'm building this relationship. I'm making a really strong relationship with Empower. And we have a talent pool there. We can go talk to these guys. We can shape them the way we want them. We can help them out. And so by having this strong relationship, that increases the value, the overall value of the company and the organization. So it's justifiable that we spend $11,000 here in managing this relationship so that we can be the first company that they call when they need us. And you see how that works? Have a pizza party. We'll pay for their, I don't know, their certificates. We will fly them to an event. Okay? I will fly to whatever city, go there, stay in a nice hotel, and take them out to lunch. Let's go, we'll go to a nice restaurant. Okay, we'll have a business meeting. Okay, and then risk assessment, which I already talked about a little bit, but again, we have to take into consideration right here during the strategic phase the risk. What are we going to do if that fails? What are we going to do if this fails? What is our contingency plan? What is the risk? There are various ways in which we can manage risk, and we're going to talk about that more in detail. But if I can just give you the high level before we break, one of the ways to deal with risk is to accept it. To accept it. To say, well, we're just going to take the risk. If something happens and it fails and we lose the money, and we go into the red, that's okay. We're going to accept the loss. Okay? What's another way that we can manage risk? Come on, Deshaun. Yes.
Apply insurance, class out for risk.
That's right. You transfer the risk. You can transfer the risk. That's another way. And you do that all the time. Here in California is the law. You have to buy car insurance. If you're going to drive a vehicle, you have to have insurance. Why do you have insurance in your car? Because you are transferring the risk. Who are you transferring the risk to? Sure. The insurance company, right? You're not taking responsibility. You're paying for the insurance and you're transferring that risk. Okay? If you get into your car and you drive without insurance, what are you doing? You are accepting the risk, right? If you buy insurance and you have insurance, you are transferring the risk. What's the other methodology? To mitigate, right? The other methodology would be to mitigate, which means, no, we're going to have a contingency plan in place. Again, backup systems, right? What we talked about earlier. Do we need more equipment? Do we need an extra server? Do we need, to have this system on standby? Do we need to have a building? Do we need to have computers? Do we need to have electricity? Do we need to have internet? How much contingency do we need to manage the risk? Well, those decisions need to be made here, because if we're going to transfer the risk, that's going to cost money. If we're going to mitigate the risk, that's also going to cost money, different amounts. Okay, if we're going to accept the risk, we are accepting that we may lose money later down the road. You see where I'm going with that? So this is where risk management takes place. We need to think about this right now because of the main concept that we are trying to manage finances here rather than later down the road. Yes?
Risk is not just financial. There will be other consequences. There will be certain consequences if you choose to transfer, and other consequences if you choose to mitigate the risk. It may be like more time that it takes you to get back up to service and work with your clients. It's not just the money, right?
It's not just the money, no. Remember, there's a concept in service design that we're going to talk about that's really important. It's the concept of the 4 Ps, and I started telling you about it earlier, but I didn't finish. But these are the 4 things we're taking into consideration, right, when we are dealing with risk management. One is the people. If I don't hire enough manpower or woman power to conduct the business, then I run the risk of wearing out my employees and thus decreasing the service because they're doing too much. They're wearing too many hats. Okay? By the way, I don't recommend that you wear many hats. If you want to live a peaceful, healthy life, do not wear too many hats. Okay? But that's just my personal recommendation. Okay, that's why my rule number 1 is don't create work for me. Yeah, see, if you create work for me, you're asking me to wear another hat, and I don't want to do that. You understand? So yes, I have to take into consideration the people. If I hire too many people, then I'm spending dollars. Okay? So from a people aspect, I'm managing team building, right? Bonuses, a way to motivate retention, employee retention, okay? And employee satisfaction are things that I need to take into place. Hey, that's why I always say, hey, what about employee satisfaction over here? Okay, you should buy me lunch every so often, boss. Okay, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, do something for your employees because you're trying to manage the risk. So from a people perspective, I'm going to put some money in the financial, right, in the budget to address the human resources aspect of things. Now, also the product. Product means equipment, okay, computers, the actual devices, controls, projectors, switches, routers, wires, firewalls, intrusion detection devices, gateways, and so on and so forth. Okay, I need to take into consideration the servers, the operating systems that I need, and do we have contingency plans for those as well? So that's the product aspect of things. Product means equipment here. There's one of the words that I told you that have different meaning from an ITIL perspective, because most of the time when you think about product, what do you think about? You're thinking about what the consumer gets. But from an ITIL perspective, product means equipment. Okay? The equipment necessary to make this service operational and make it operational effectively. Okay? So when I'm thinking product, I'm thinking equipment. And then the other one would be the partners. Do we have partners, enough partners in place? We cannot be dependent on just one partner. Because if that partner fails to deliver, what's my risk? How am I going to manage that risk? If that partner, if there's a natural disaster and they can't continue to provide, I can't stop the operation. I'm going to have other partners in place. You see how that works? I need to have other partners in place so that I'm managing the partner aspect of the business. And so I'm going to have somebody do the management, supplier management right here. That happens here in the service design. I'm going to have to make sure that I forecast that during the strategic plan so that I have dollars in place to manage the relationships with the suppliers and to have the different suppliers in place so that if one fails, then I can switch over to another one, okay? Without loss of productivity, okay? And so how does that, look from a strategic perspective? Well, again, most of the time, it turns in, you visualize it from a dollar perspective, okay? Even though it's not just money, you're right, it's not just money, but it takes money to run the entire operation, right? And then the other aspect of this, the risk, is do we have the processes in place? That's the other P, right? So we have the 4 Ps are people, products, partners, and processes. Do I have those things in place? And I need to take those things into consideration when I'm trying to manage the risk, because I need to make sure that that information gets documented accordingly and that we have the dollars in place in the budget to make it happen, to continue to provide the service even if there is a natural disaster. Okay? Questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, concerns? Yes.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Bring it on.
I'm just trying to figure out service strategy leads to service design, and then service design leads to transition, and then transition leads to operations, and then continuous service improvement that kind of manages all of this. So is it like just one direction of how things happen? Or if I get to the operations point and something's not right, I need to go back and start all over again?
Right. So yes to your question. The question is that is continual service improvement presented as a linear phase of the recommendations of ITIL, or can it be all over the place? And the answer is yes, it can be all over the place. That's why when you look at this circle, it's touching on all of the aspects. You see that? It's touching on service design, service transition, and service operation. I can stop at any time and conduct an evaluation of how I'm doing, okay?
Evaluation can be at any of these 5 stages.
Exactly. Evaluation can be at any of the 5 stages. There is a process for that as well, right? This is why change management and continual service improvement kind of goes together. So when I'm looking at this slide right here, I'm looking at change evaluation and change management here, but these go together with this, because what happens is, with this as in continuous service improvement, because what happens is that if I've evaluated that a change needs to take place, then I need to go through the change management process, which we're going to talk about later. Okay, so you see how they're kind of touching each other. And then if my service catalog needs to be addressed, then of course we're touching on that, right, from continual service improvement. It needs to be improved. So at what point? Well, it depends. It depends on the service. It depends on the culture of the company. It depends on the importance of the services, right? It depends on whether it's a critical business activity or whether it's an issue that can be addressed later, right? If it needs to be addressed now, then we have what we call, let me see. Yeah, still in change management, still within change management, there is what we call an emergency change, okay? So at any point we can call for a ECAB. What's an ECAB?
Emergency Change Advisory Board.
The Emergency Change Advisory Board. We can summon the Change Advisory Board in this case, an emergency change advisory board to evaluate whether a change is necessary. Okay, if a change is if this change advisory board decide that a change is necessary, we might need to move that process back to financial management. Okay, because we need a green light from the people that are responsible for strategizing. But we put together an ECAV because these people can make decisions that can be justified later. Okay, an ECAV, an Emergency Change Advisory Board, and by the way, this board could be anybody within the organization, normally managers, junior managers, and maybe at least one executive supervisor, okay? Because what happens is you might say, well, that needs improvement right there. We haven't even operationalized it, but it needs improvement. Well, let's go through the change management now process. If the change needs to happen right now, we're going to allow the Emergency Change Advisory Board to make the change and then justify it in writing. Does that make sense? Okay. We normally don't want that because we don't want people making decisions out here, you know, loose cannons, if you will, making decisions without making sure that you go through the entire process of notifying all the stakeholders, okay, getting approval for budgets, okay. That may take time because maybe somebody's on vacation, they're not back until 2 weeks from now, so we can't really move forward unless that person delegated their decision-making power to somebody else. And a lot of companies will require you to do that. If you're going to leave for vacation, you need to delegate power to somebody else. Okay, that person will make decisions on your behalf when you're done. We do that to ensure that this process continues to operate even if you're not here. Capiche? Okay, let's, wow, that was 2 hours. You guys are hanging in there. You guys are tough. You like breathe, huh? Yeah. I need some water. Okay, let me see. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. It's 11:25. We'll be back at 11:35.